I was asked the strangest question. The question was, two athletes are going to fight. Athlete A has spent the last 10 years wrestling every day. Athlete B has spent 10 years doing jiu-jitsu. That's all you know. You put them together based on the resumes. Who do you pick to win the fight? And that doesn't take me any time. I thought it was a strange question. Take the jiu-jitsu guy. Period. Because of the unified rules where essentially you're playing a big game of mercy. And I do believe over time, if you also incorporated that, then they've also had 6 months of MMA training. Well, you might have a different answer. But a wrestler is going to have the ability. One, he's going to have pace. Two, he's going to understand position. But he's not going to understand posture, and he's not even going to understand how to pound. He might be able to take the fight from the feet to the ground, but if that's where the jiu-jitsu guy wants to be anyway, and you're rewarded for submissions, and only one guy knows a submission, it would also seem that historically I would be correct. If you were to go back and look at the first time we ever had a real wrestler, that would be Dan Severn, against a real jiu-jitsu guy, that would be Royce Gracie. That was a long fight, that was a hard fight, that was a grueling fight, but ultimately you had a man with a 100-pound size advantage in Dan Severn who came in second to Royce Gracie. That's how everything kind of kicked off. Now, the argument that I just made for you is it's gonna take a little water. There's gonna be a couple of holes in the boat when you get a great historian to come forward and say, yes, Chael, but that was under a time before the unified rules when there was no breaks in the action and the contest could go up to 30 minutes continuous. Now there's a break in the action every single 5 minutes, or due to non-activity, where they're going to be stood back up. Okay, I hear all of those things, but I don't know that it's going to change the outcome. Also, I'm speaking from a personal opinion. As a lifelong wrestler who then became a black belt in jiu-jitsu, I can just share with you, if you want to finish a fight, it would be more helpful to know the submission holds to finish the fight than to gain the position of the wrestler. Now, if you had overall MMA training, you could have another argument that position trumps submission. That is more of a philosophy that came along from Frank Shamrock. So many people had worked so long and hard at passing guard. Frank Shamrock, who was the champion of the world, said, don't pass guard. Stay in guard. Pound from guard. Just don't get caught in anything. Okay. As simple as that may seem, that philosophy was never stated and never put out there by anybody of any validity until Frank made that statement. Don't pass guard. Stay in there and pound. Guy won a world championship, you got to listen to him. I was influenced largely by Mark Schultz. Mark Schultz, I met him in 1995. He was the head wrestling coach, Brigham Young University, where I was going to college. And Mark was a world and Olympic champion in wrestling. He was also undefeated in mixed martial arts at 1-0 in the UFC, and he had lost a fight. He lost a street fight to Rickson Gracie. And Schultz told me, man, I've been wrestling my whole life. The only thing that beats wrestling is jiu-jitsu. I found that out the hard way. I went to Pedro Sauer and Walt Bayless after that every day until I got a black belt, just so that never happens to me again. But when he told me that, I'm 18 years old, he's the coach. When he tells me there's one thing out there that beats wrestling, this very sport that we're here in the BYU wrestling room on scholarship to do, is jiu-jitsu, I just believed him. And that could be a little bit naive by me, but I think that I also just offered you a number of historical examples. I mean, look, Royce versus Dan Severn. Dan Severn did not know a lot about MMA. Dan Severn did not know a lot about jiu-jitsu. This was at a time when mixed martial arts wasn't even a term yet. This is back when if you wanted to be a fighter, you would go to a boxing gym on Monday and a wrestling gym on Tuesday and a Muay Thai class on Wednesday and go lift some weights on Thursday, and on Saturday you get in the ring and just try to figure it out. And so this was a time when it was very raw wrestler, but who had a 100-pound size advantage against jiu-jitsu. But he knew the art and knew the submissions. And I think that ultimately you do have to refer back to that. I think we all started to learn things that night. And Dan Severn served not only himself, but he served the sport of wrestling very well. Dan Severn is the one that let every wrestler know, oh my goodness, we have a skill that would work in combat. Wrestling has never been known as a martial art, still isn't to this day. Within the schools and the NCAA and the International Olympic Committee, it does not fall under the scope of martial art. But we have now learned through trial and error and practice and observation that in fact it is. That it is a very good form of combat. But Dan Severn is the one that first had the courage to go out and test that and show us how important position was. But ultimately, Royce reminded us how important submission is.